On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
Well, as I put an episode together, I always confer with Louis, our producer, about how to make what we do relevant to people old and young across the world. So Louis, in this episode I thought you'd be pleased to know that we have got a great breakthrough in the study of English literature.
Young people don't need English literature anymore, they've got Yu-Gi-Oh!
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Here I am, and as you can hear by the fact that I'm no longer spluttering like an epileptic grampus, I'm feeling, if not 100%, I'm feeling considerably better than I was in the previous video. Thank you very much to all of you who sent good wishes, prayers and healing vibes, because at least some of them must have worked, because I am here, I am upright, and I'm here presenting a new episode of On the Track. And I just want to tell you all here now how proud I am to be able to present the answer to one of the great mysteries of British literature. For many hundreds of years, people have been questioning whether the man known as William Shakespeare was actually the bloke who wrote such great plays as Hamlet, Macbeth, and all the other ones I can't be bothered to remember, including Henry V that I did for my O-levels. Oh, for a muse of fire that dare not something or something of invention, something or other. That's not bad. I managed to remember the first sentence, which isn't bad considering that it was 1976 the last time I spoke those words. But now we can actually prove the real author of Shakespeare's plays, because we have sent along to Stratford our very, very own undercover reporter, Wally the comedy rhinoceros. Wally decided that he had to hit the ground running, and right from the start he got into character, or got into his version of the character, and began to explore Stratford-upon-Avon. Apparently, despite the fact it is so important, there are absolutely no references to railway stations in the entire canon of Shakespeare's work, and Wally found that really quite intriguing and sinister. However, while Wally disembarks from the train and goes to explore Stratford-upon-Avon, I asked other members of the On the Track team what they thought of William Shakespeare. So Louis, what do you think about William Shakespeare?
Wait, is that the drunk javelin guy from the Olympics?
First of all, Wally needed to ascertain exactly who William Shakespeare was, so he found a statue of him and decided for some reason of his own to climb up it. And then, as Wally explores the historic parts of the town...
You're scaring us, George! George, behave yourself! Georgie?
Somebody seems to accuse him of being somebody called George, and neither Wally or us know who George is. But that's all from Wally in Stratford this episode, because there is enough to do a full episode on the subject, but unfortunately we have to deal with cryptozoology as well. So we'll be back with Wally in Stratford very, very soon. And that is, I think, what they call a bar part of even introduction.
I really like the old credits.
Back in the days of the Old West, it was the proud boast of the people in charge of the Pony Express that the Pony Express would always get through, come hell or high water. And if you look at this advert, which I found online, asking people to join up and become Pony Express riders, they particularly wanted orphans, which I find mildly amusing, so amusing that I am not that sure that this was a bona fide, genuine advert, rather than something that was put together by Google for some other reason. And well, why am I talking about ponies and Pony Expresses? Because let's face it, the CFZ's got nothing at all to do with either, apart from the fact that our own dear sweet Richard Freeman finds the word pony so funny that whenever he hears it he falls over around the place laughing hysterically, like some sort of a mad creature. No, the reason that I am quoting the Pony Express is that, despite what I said in the introduction, my cold has not gone. I feel bloody awful. But because I want to make sure that we continue to keep our schedules going, I am carrying on doing this episode even though I feel bloody awful while doing it. But I'm not asking you to all be proud of me for my cleverness and braveness. I just want to apologise to you all for the way that I sound all croaky and crap. On with the show. When I was a boy living in Hong Kong just over 50 years ago, there was only one small sounder or family group of wild boar in the colony, and they were living in the deep bay marshes close to the Chinese border. Now they are incredibly common and are in many people's eyes becoming a pest. They're found all over the former British colony, including the islands. And this is a question that's been being talked a lot about in the last few weeks. And appropriately enough, I first heard about this from a news item sent to me by my old friend Richard Muirhead, who was a boy with me, and I've known him since 1970 when we were both living back in Hong Kong. Hong Kong authorities have had enough of wild boars. An increasing number of attacks by the animals, including one that bit a police officer last week, triggered an operation on Wednesday night in a district less than half an hour's drive from Hong Kong's financial centre. Experts used dart guns to capture 7 wild boars, which were later put down via medicine injections, the Agriculture, Fisheries and Conservation Department said in a statement. Wild boars are a common sight in Hong Kong along hiking trails. They are often fed by people despite appeals by authorities not to do so, as they could transmit diseases and may gather in large numbers. Previous attempts to relocate and sterilise the boars could not effectively control the wild pig nuisance, the department said. A large group of wild pigs continued to wander and gather at the site, posing threats to members of the public and road users, the statement read. It's neither mine nor Lilith's place to criticise Hong Kong government policy in this or any other matter, and I shall not do so, but one thing I was wondering, can anybody out there in the viewership land actually think of another animal that has been so rare and then, as a result of conservation, becomes such an enormous pest? I think it's possibly a unique situation, but it does show something that is very, very interesting. The population dynamics of wild swine, because remember, everybody calls them wild boars, but actually it's only the adult males that are boars, the adult females are sows, and the babies are piglets. So it is something interesting about the population dynamics of wild swine, that they do come and go in a way that, again, I can't think of any other creature that does so. The best example of this that I can give is wild boar in England. Now, wild boar were extinct in England since the late part of the interregnum, the time between the execution of Charles I and the restoration of the monarchy with his son Charles II. I thought I'd better stop here for a moment and make a little apology, because Louis is actually listening in, and I know what he's like about making the show relevant to young people. So, guys, I do sort of apologise for giving this history lesson.
John, young people don't need history. We've got BBC Three.
And so, boys and girls, the interregnum took place between 1649 and 1660, 11 years in which, for the only time in her existence, England was a republic. Bingo. They had been hunted almost to extinction some years before that, but Charles I, mainly for sporting reasons, had encouraged conservation of wild swine in the New Forest, and they got up to quite big numbers there again. But it was Cromwell's troops who butchered them for food, and they were finally wiped out back then in the interregnum. Now, wild boar are now quite a regular occurrence in the British countryside, and that's mostly because animal rights organisations within the past 25 years introduced them by breaking down the fences around wild game farms where wild boar were being kept for meat, and they escaped into the British countryside, and they thrived there in the way that they always had. Now, again, I'm not going to comment one way or the other on the animal rights organisations in this occasion. There are things that animal rights organisations have done that I think were right, and there are things they've done which I think were wrong, particularly releasing large amounts of mink into the countryside where they destroyed enormous amounts of the local wildlife. But I'm not going to comment about this on the wild boar, because there are good things about it and bad things about it, and this show, believe it or not, is about natural history and cryptozoology and Forteana rather than about my cockeyed views of politics. So, moving swiftly on. There are now wild boar in many parts of England, but something which has been quite widely forgotten is that during the years when wild swine was supposedly extinct here, especially during the 50s, 60s and 70s, there were still occasional sightings of wild boar. Now, where did they come from? And here, by the way, I'm using as my source material a book by my old friend John Michel, who sadly died some years ago, and 14 Times founder Bob Rickard. It's an excellent book, and I recommend that all of you go out and try and find a copy as quickly and as soon as you can, because it is full of fascinating source material, quite a lot of which I draw upon in these shows. Now I want to introduce you to another author, and this is one whom I really wish that I'd known, but as he died in 1928, unfortunately that would have been impossible. His name was James Edmund Harting, and amongst many other books about natural history, zoology and wildlife in general, he wrote a book about British extinct animals. And worry not, because yes, of course I'm going to suggest that you all go out and read a copy, but it's not expensive, and if you want to, you can even get it for free on the Internet Archive at this link here. Check it out. Now, if you turn to page 110, just in case you don't believe me, it talks how several people quoted by Harting note that there is a breed of pig in the New Forest that looks very, very much like wild boars. Check this link. And this excerpt. Now, on top of that, Harting notes that at the time he was writing, in the 19th century, that it was the custom for the farmers in the New Forest to put their pigs out in the same way as on Dartmoor, Exmoor and the New Forest today people let out their sheep and their ponies. They put their pigs out to live wild in the forest. And I think that there is enough supportive evidence here to suggest that the gene pool of the wild boars that were introduced by King Charles I, if not the ones that were there before the indigenous wild boars, has become part, or at least had become part, of the New Forest pig genome, and that for various reasons, and I'm not as much of a geneticist as I would pretend to be or like to be, but for some reasons which I'm sure other people would be able to explain better than me, regularly, at least until farming became the sort of factory farming abomination which it tends to be these days, various pigs that appeared to be, and genetically probably were very close to being, wild boar, were living at various times in the New Forest area, which I think explains how the wild boar that were killed as roadkill or were sighted and then ran away scampering off into their freedom that were seen in the 60s and 70s in parts of Hampshire. It explains, to my satisfaction at least, how this came to be. And in a piece that I wrote and then got lost when my computer blew up, and we're talking about over 25 years ago here, I referred to these creatures from the New Forest as Harting's forest hogs, and I would propose that that's a very good term for them now. Now, I must admit that I failed on one thing in this segment. Lilith and I were both hoping we could get comments in about our beloved Prime Minister, about Peppa Pig, and about this piece of revolutionary art from 50 years ago in 1971, but unfortunately we failed completely. Well, as at least part of the last segment was about animal rights, I suppose this next little snippet, which Louis gave it to me in order to make me laugh, while I was feeling very unwell earlier in the week, I think this little snippet follows on reasonably thematically. I understand totally why the animal welfare organisation PETA pissed so many people off. There are things they've done that I find annoying, and I generally agree with their aims. But I find this a spoof on the fashion company Urban Outfitters, which claims to be a company selling clothes made out of real human leather. I'm afraid I found this massively funny. Most people who've seen it seem to be revolted and are going, how dare they? Why could they do such a horrible thing? Well, I think it's funny. And I rather like some of those boots, you know.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And there's the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell. Otherwise you won't be told when there's a new show to watch. And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it? And here we go. We've come to the end of another show, and I've just about survived it. It's taken far longer to do than normal because I ended up having days off in bed in the middle of it, and there was at least 2 days that I couldn't actually talk properly because my voice was unintelligible. So please forgive me for taking so long. But it does mean that we are back on track and that the scheduling for this show, which I am very proud of, and which is probably the thing I enjoy doing most in my life, the scheduling for this show is still fine for the rest of the year. So let's hope it all carries on like that. I want to say a big, big, big thank you to everybody who helped, particularly Carl and Geordie, and Miss Maxine, and of course Graham and Sarah, who have been keeping the home fires burning and keeping things going. And a big, big thank you to Louis and V for all their help and input. And of course the biggest thanks to my co-host, the lovely Lilith Tinkerbell. And somebody commented the other day to me in one of the comments for the show about the fact that Lilith and Tinkerbell were both female archetype characters that had similar attributes, which I've always agreed with. I mean, I don't know if that's why my late wife named her so. I suggested the name Lilith, and she came up with the Tinkerbell, and they seemed to work together. However, one thing that both my wives had in common was that when I shared with them something that I've always felt about J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, that it is a book totally thick, totally strewn with heavy repressed sexuality, and that Tinkerbell and Wendy and Tiger Lily were all three strong, very female and very sexual characters. They both told me that I was being revolting and to stop perverting children's literature like that. Well, I do not like to argue with even my ex-wife, and certainly not with my dead wife, but I think you're both completely wrong on this. I think that Peter Pan is a fantastic book about sexual repression, sexual frustrations, and all sorts of other things that didn't really surprise me when Alan Moore did a lovely homage to it in one of his books from about 20 years ago. But enough of that. There should be time for that somewhere else, and I'm sure there is. So I just want to say, don't be disappointed that the show is over. There's only another 7 days till the next episode, and Lilith and me, and probably V and Louis, who always stay in for the live chat, and various other people from the CFZ family who have started sitting on the live chat, will all be very glad when you're there to see us, because we'll be seeing you.